welcome to the 61st episode of the Unifying Force. I'm Kat, joined by Dave and Gio. And this week we lost Carl Weathers. Really cool guy, legend. Some people know him as Greef Karga in Star Wars. In The Mandalorian, he directed a couple episodes. Mostly known as Apollo Creed, Action Jackson, Al Dillon from Predator, all sorts of things. So we're going to spend the day talking about Carl Weathers.
Anybody?
How about you start?
Yeah. Let's go from left to right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's me.
Yeah.
All right. So here's where, like this one hit me pretty hard. Because Carl Weathers has just been so ubiquitous in things that were in the 80s and 90s and things that I've seen. And it hit me even harder because of my affinity for 80s and 90s film, his work as Apollo Creed. I was scheduled to go meet him in March. Was scheduled to be at GalaxyCon Richmond, which is only a couple of hours away. It was going to be a reunion of him and Dolph Lundgren at the same con at the same time. And I was just like, wow, okay, that's an opportunity you can't miss. Because how I came to Carl Weathers is Rocky IV. Rocky IV is the first of the Rocky films that I ever remember seeing. I know it's the first one I ever saw in the theaters because it came out that kind of Thanksgiving time, like the end of November, and I think it was 1985. So I remember that as the first movie I ever saw, like with a friend that I'd gone out to with someone other than my family. Is the first movie I'd seen in the theaters that way. And we went to this was when the screens were huge. You know, it wasn't a megaplex. There was one or two screens, and it's Rocky IV, and you've got Apollo Creed and Dolph Lundgren, you know, Ivan Drago, just larger than life on the screen. And speaking of larger than life, then you get the James Brown intro to Apollo Creed. Living in America. Okay, and it was the 80s. It's patriotic. It's like we're beating up the Russians, man. It's and it's always been a great film. I still love that film. I've come to love that film more that I learned more about the behind the scenes is as I was older and in my 20s, I lived in Jackson, Wyoming, or a little town outside of Jackson, Wyoming, and found that whole Russia sequence was filmed there where I lived. Like I could look out the window and I'm seeing the butte that Rocky runs up in the snow when he's training and the montage is going. You could drive by the little cabin that was there. And I heard stories from some friends of mine that it caused such an uproar when not that Stallone and Carl Weathers come to town and it's this big deal. Well, Carl Weathers wouldn't have come to town because he was dead by that point. But that Stallone's in town, not a big deal. What the big deal was is people there thought we were being invaded because they filmed the airport scene by turning the airport, putting all of those red stars and Russian flags and putting the stuff on the sides of the carriers.
Hammer and sickle around.
Going by, seeing the hammer and sickle, and it's just like, it's Red Dawn, we're being invaded. No. So I've always come to really appreciate that movie for those kind of personal experiences and just how amazing and how much reality Carl Weathers brought to that. And you can't even imagine, like, he's playing the I'm getting old in 1985 and this man was still actively working now in 2024.
Yeah, an incredible run.
I mean, it was a very powerful thing. And I've come to, go back and watch him in all the Rocky movies and everything else after that. And it's just, he will be missed. How about one of you? What do you think? Where did you first experience Carl Weathers?
Okay, so I would have been catching glimpses of Rocky 3. So I always identified him as an ally to Rocky rather than an adversarial character, because that is the one film of the franchise that I had most exposure to. And the second would be actually in Predator. So to me, I always saw Carl Weathers truly as Arnold Schwarzenegger's equal. I saw him as, right up there. I'd wonder, how or why we didn't see Carl Weathers in more films, and see his kind of career kick off and broaden in the way that Arnold's did. And the impact of seeing Predator was huge. And just seeing, I think the fact that you've got somebody who was so patriotic and kind of jingoistic in the Rocky franchise, and then it almost felt like it was slightly less so in Predator, even though that's a testosterone-fueled gung-ho film in many ways as well. I just had this association with really somebody who's really dedicated to their craft. They've physically transformed themselves into the characters, although he had a career actually as a linebacker, playing football. So he was always somebody who would have had this physical presence. And to me, he was as impressive, an on-screen presence in terms of like that bravado and charisma, as Arnold. So to me, that's absolute megastar level. And I wish I'd seen him maybe in more stuff growing up. The Rocky films, I've only really seen the beginning and end of that franchise properly as an adult, but his role in it is huge. And I think how understated he was at the beginning of that franchise relative to how huge he got through it, I think is an interesting transition in his acting. And then coming up to more recently, obviously, I think his acting, his comedic acting is not to be underrated at all. Happy Gilmore is one of the Adam Sandler films that I can I can stand and I actually do enjoy, and that's a large part down to him. And he had a turn in Arrested Development that was a lot of fun as well. So I saw him as somebody who actually had quite a diverse range, and I'm really glad we got to see him in Star Wars live action with Greef Karga as the Mandalorian series kicked on. Kat, what was the most impactful or first impression?
Something I would say is impactful, but I mean, I haven't seen any of the Rocky movies. I saw the Creed films. I was like, okay, Creed. I knew the storyline of the Rocky movies, of course. Like, it's something you always kind of know from seeing bits of it on TV or stuff. So
it's in the zeitgeist, yeah.
Yeah, it's been in the zeitgeist long enough. And I was just looking over his filmography here, and a lot of stuff I haven't, like TV and stuff like that, on and off. I haven't seen him in a bunch of big movies. The first one I saw him in, of course, was this one, Predator.
Yeah.
He was really good in that, and I like, again, because it's in the zeitgeist. The Rocky movies are so in the zeitgeist. I did pick up on the total inversion of that whole patriotic thing they were doing with his role as Apollo Creed and Rocky, whereas in Predator, he's kind of playing the corrupt company man who screws his friends over and, oh, I don't care about you, you're expendable, that kind of thing. Like, he's kind of good at humor because they kind of play it for laughs that he's really not cut out for going out into the field again. And but then you have that, when he meets Schwarzenegger, and they're capitalizing like, this guy's just played Apollo Creed. Let's have this moment with Schwarzenegger where they're going to do the the little hand wrestling thing because they want to show off that, hey, we're going to put Apollo Creed with Schwarzenegger in a movie, and Jesse Ventura, who just retired from the WWE, this is going to be amazing, that kind of thing, which probably was more of a big deal back in '87 that they were doing that than it would be as a kid watching it later, because I probably saw it for the first time in '92. It was on TV, and it didn't matter what our friends and I were doing. If that was on TV, we dropped everything we were doing and watching it. We were totally mesmerized by it.
Yeah,
And then-
it had an effect on me
and
too.
having seen stuff like Reds and the Expendables and stuff like that we've had today, you don't fully appreciate and get what kind of a big badass kind of team up Apollo Creed and Schwarzenegger and Jesse Ventura and all those guys were in Predator. You had to have the best of the best of the best to take down the Predator.
Yeah, and it's cool because when you see, Carl Weathers is the one who's given the first, alleged hero moment where he is the one who's going to run off and chase the Predator solo. Because we see that Max kind of losing it because he wants to, avenge his friend, but Dylan's the one who takes off. Schwarzenegger gives him his gun, and you think because it's Carl Weathers and he's so, he's going to redeem himself for screwing over his friends and he's going to save the day, and then oops, that doesn't happen. And you kind of expect that it's going to be a big moment, but I thought he was really good in that movie. And I had seen him off and on in some other things over the years, but Happy Gilmore comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also really early '90s. And then he had a little spot in another one, a little Nicky, of course, Action Jackson. That's another one that was, but that was way back in 1988. I mean, not as popular.
That I think is his like starring vehicle that he got from Predator. Like, I think that was immediately after Predator.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then really I hadn't seen him in much again after that until The Mandalorian. It was more like I've always been aware of Carl Weathers. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he's really cool. And then, of course, he got cast in the Toy Story franchise as Combat Carl and all their individual one-off specials, and then Toy Story 4. And I made sure when I was supposed to go to Celebration Anaheim 2 years ago, I saw Carl Weathers was up. I bought a photo op and autograph with him. I pre-ordered that. I'm like, I'm gonna meet Carl Weathers, and I was gonna bring get a Predator. I was gonna buy a Predator T-shirt for the occasion because that's what I really wanted to meet him for. Yeah. And then events conspired against me. I didn't get to go, and now it's like, I'm never gonna see him after that. And I mean, I know they just announced the Mandalorian movie, and that just took a huge blow because he's a big part of that. That's not something you could just replace, because Carl Weathers had such charisma in that role and he was so good at it. And it really brought him, like he said, he'd done some con circuits and stuff before, but this kind of introduced him to a whole new generation of fans. Mm-hmm. And he also really loved it. Case in point, they let him start directing episodes. He was really getting into it. And then to have this happen, I mean, he was relatively young by today's standards, 76.
Yeah.
So that's really, really sad.
Well, and I know,
it really is.
I know just from people we've talked to and people we've talked to on the air on our other shows on the VC Watch Along, like the night before he died, we had just been talking to Brendan Wayne mentioning Carl and his work on The Mandalorian, and just that whole crew of Mandalorian actors, just at least to us in the outside and everything that they say, has just become such a family of people, a family of Star Wars fans working together. And the ones that we have talked to are just absolutely beside themselves. I think the greatest story that it's been shared here on the air before, so I'll share this again here, is Chris Bartlett talking about Carl Weathers and a scene that they were doing. And for those of you that, don't exactly know, that Chris Bartlett plays a lot of droids. Specifically, he tends to play like protocol droids in the style of C-3PO. Mm-hmm. And so when he's acting, when he's on set, he's completely covered. He's in a mask. He's generally not even in like a flexible mask or anything like others. He doesn't emote. He can't. It's deadpan electronic droid face. So he's telling me this story that when his character, his droid, is interacting with Greef Karga and they have scenes together, he's rehearsing and Carl insists, like Chris is used to coming on set as the droid and he does this whole thing, and so people think of him as the droid. Carl was having no part of that. He's like, no, I need to rehearse these lines with you ahead of time without the mask. I need you to take that off and let's go back and forth and do our back and forth in our lines without that. And I was like, I thought that was the greatest story ever. And I just assumed. So I asked Chris the question on air. I was like, oh, is that how Carl is as a director? That's what he wants to get that and get right down to it. And he's like, no, that wasn't an episode Carl was directing. That was him as the actor wanting that feedback and just wanting to do that and pushing for them to be able to do that on the show so he could get it. And I was like, that's crazy. If he's going to do that as an actor, what does he do? How does he get to the heart of it as a director? Just wow.
Yeah, that is awesome. Because he injected so much life into a character that could otherwise have just been a stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's leading the Bounty Hunters Guild on Navarro didn't necessarily have to be a character that had any dimension to him, and yet through, as we said, his charismatic portrayal and the kind of extra, I guess, kind of bells and whistles of a performance that he gave just in season 1 of The Mandalorian, where again it's a little like his Rocky saga arc. He starts as an adversary, and then by the end he's an ally. And we see that through season 1 of The Mandalorian, and he goes from someone who's imposing and threatening in a physical sense and in a material way, being the leader of the Bounty Hunters Guild, and knowing that Din Djarin's got the asset now and is going rogue. His character, Greef Karga, was present for some of the most standout moments in season 1, all involving the convent of the Mandalorians, the Children of the Watch on Navarro. And it was therefore, the big finale where you have the stormtroopers enclosing around, the first glimpse of, Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian, where you think, he's the plot armor is thinning out a little bit here. His helmet's off. He's looking wounded. They're completely surrounded. Something spectacular has to happen. And then you have Pedro Pascal do his best, the Rocketeer impression at the end of season 1, activating that jetpack and, having a really almost super heroic moment at the end. It was in reading a little bit more about some of the tributes that were coming out to Carl Weathers that I found an interview from October 2019 that was highlighted in Collider, and it was on there was a prerequisite for Carl Weathers coming into the Star Wars fold, and that was he'd befriended Jon Favreau through the DGA, the Directors Guild of America, which immediately seems a little bit surprising that someone who's not known for directorial really anything up until this point had that way of contact with someone who was foundational to Star Wars television. But he asked Jon Favreau, I really like this role, but if you are to sway me to really be part of this universe, I need you to let me have the opportunity to direct in the Star Wars sandbox. And so that was something he, of course, couldn't share with anyone. There were embargoes and NDAs and all sorts, in the entire secrecy building up to Mandalorian season 1. But he kept it quiet, and it was not something he could talk about until his directorial debut in season 2. Well, and I think it's a really interesting aspect of his character that we wouldn't necessarily have known.
Well, and it's a thing that I didn't know before he really started directing The Mandalorian, that he's been directing since 1995. Okay,
that's the DGA link.
Yeah, is Carl Weathers has done episodes of it's a lot of TV, but it's a lot of TV that it's not like memorable, but it's not award-winning crazy. This is like must-see TV, Friends, whatever kind of things, but they're like niche shows that you should know that everybody kind of does, like Renegade with Lorenzo Lamas. Okay, that was just he's directed that. Silk Stockings, that was kind of like a late night TV show kind of deal. I think it came on like it was racy enough that it had to be on way after prime time. But I think he did something like 8 or 10 episodes of that. Pensacola Wings of Gold, like Sheena. I don't even know what that is. I assume maybe a take on Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, or something else. But
Most likely, yeah.
it's like the new Hawaii Five-0. He's done
Yeah.
that. Like the last OG episodes of Law and Order.
Right.
Is Chicago Med, and he did a lot of work on that. Those whole Chicago shows, there's Fire, Med, Justice. He was a lot on there. So he's been directing for a long time, and I completely did not know that. And some other stuff I found in researching, and it's meaningful, but it's sad that we find this out after someone's passed. Is you go start looking into their life. Is I had always just assumed, I've seen his football cards and this or that, and seen him in, Rocky as the bad guy, and just this just huge, bulky, powerful man. And Kat, I cannot believe you have not seen the original Rocky, and that is an Oscar-winning film. That's probably the best of them. You need to seek that out.
There were better movies that should have won the Oscar that year. I'm sorry.
Quite possibly, yes. But again, that was a good film. I question what that film would have been if Stallone hadn't stuck to his guns and not only written it, but been in it. And if, he hadn't found Carl Weathers. I think if you haven't seen it, there are amazing tributes out on the internet from Stallone, from Brendan Wayne, from Chris Bartlett, from Adam Sandler, from Gina Carano, from all of these people who have worked with Carl Weathers. Go look at those tributes. And I think one of the stories told is Carl was picked to be Apollo Creed because I think when he came in to run his lines or whatever to audition with Stallone, like he's the only one that's like, who is this guy? What is he doing? How does he act? He's like criticizing. So, and they're like, Stallone's like, I want that guy. He's going to make me better.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he came in smack talking at the first read.
Yeah.
And that's when they were like, okay, he's the kind of nemesis we need to, fix our hero as the antagonist here.
But
I think that might say something that in terms of maybe him, Carl Weathers alluding to the fact that you're not really casting this guy as Rocky, are you? Because he's reading, and it's like, yeah, he actually has a point there.
What's this reading tone he's taking? Is he going to be more lively on set? Yeah.
No, I meant that Carl Weathers was right that maybe they should have gotten another actor to play Rocky. That's just me. But
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think to me,
I like that they cast. That's funny that's why. Oh yeah, we should cast him because that seems like something Apollo Creed would say.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of
that's not the way Stallone says it. Stallone says it that he's criticizing my acting. And he is more experienced than I am. And that's what I was going for. It's a shame that we find this out after he's passed. Carl Weathers was not the man that he stereotypically appeared to be. You would think, okay, he is a football player that turned to acting. Not really. If you go back and you look at stories and things about his early life, Carl Weathers was an actor who used football as a means. He used football as a means to pay for his acting education. He got, I think, master's degrees in theater by using football to pay for that education. He was always, even when he was playing professional football, he's doing like acting gigs on the side. He starred in several early, I think, uncredited blaxploitation films in the 70s. He's done an episode of Good Times, and he'd show up on any kind of TV show that you can get. He's on Kung Fu. He's on SWAT, the $6 Million Man, Cannon. He's doing all of these things, even. I mean, some of those are just slightly after his football career, but the first ones are during the time that he's playing football. So it's not what you think it is, which is, oh yeah, it's whoever that's done this kind of thing. He's this athlete that just not really.
He's just the token jock that's gone from physical violence to on-screen violence.
Yeah.
He doesn't have that background at all. That is really interesting because it seems that he had this plan all along, to be a performer rather than just be known for his physical attributes, getting into college and playing college football. And then I think he was drafted at one point for the Oakland Raiders. Mm-hmm. So he had a couple of games in the NFL, and that, he kind of leveraged all of that into a springboard to get him into acting. And the fact that you say he was doing it while he was at college and playing is even more impressive. That he wasn't afraid to get involved.
He'd been acting in plays and whatnot since grade school, and chose acting, like I said, at San Diego State University. He received a master in theater arts while playing football and taking them to the Pasadena Bowl there. So he's doing all these things, and he's gone back. Where was it? It said that he got another degree beyond that. Just, I can play football for you, but I'm going to go and study my craft and do this at the same time. That's really kind of the impressive thing. Yeah, and just the roles that you don't realize, like I had totally forgotten that he was in Toy Story, the Toy Story franchise. That went over me is things that you go and you look at in his IMDb. Is he's been a part of huge franchises, for lack of it. Starsky and Hutch, Barnaby Jones, Streets of San Francisco, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Force 10 from Navarone.
Really diverse project as well.
Absolutely.
As with quite iconic ones in that era of TV.
And where you guys were like, after Action Jackson and after Predator, where, he kind of disappears for a little while. I think he was in like a niche TV series in the late 80s there. He was in Tour of Duty. I don't know if you guys watched that. Tour of Duty was really good at the time. I don't know how it would hold up. I want to like almost go back and rewatch it now. But military film, and he played a colonel in that for 9-10 episodes, a good long while in that. Is so he's in that and doing all sorts of things. Then that's between in the kind of late 80s, early 90s space between Predator and going back as a comedic actor in Happy Gilmore.
Right. I think also he's always struck me as somebody who has an amazing on-screen presence, but also what a voice. I'm surprised that we didn't see him in more projects or hear him in more projects just as a voice actor, especially the kind of explosion post 2001 when Shrek really kicked off and was the first DreamWorks animated feature, and kind of kicked the ball rolling on having known actors taking up voice roles, which is a little controversial anyway.
Surprisingly, we did. If you look at his IMDb, he did a crap ton of voice work in cartoons and video games in the early 2000s. And it's properties that, may not have hit or missed or here or there, but he's in these. He's in 8 Crazy Nights, again, an Adam Sandler film. He's in there as like just regular GNC guy, the guy, at the GNC store. You need a stereotypical jock. There's
you
Carl
want some whey protein?
He's in Balto 3, a direct-to-video sequel to the Balto movies. A video game called Mercenaries, Playground of Destruction.
Yeah, I actually knew he was in that one because that's the studio. I hadn't played the game, but that was a project made by Pandemic Studios, which might hit differently as a studio name now, but they were the people who developed the OG Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2, which are still regarded in the video game universe and in Star Wars fandom as some of the best Star Wars video games ever. So yeah, what I think I'm trying to say is that I'm surprised we didn't hear him more in bigger budget projects and in ones that broke through more in either to the mainstream or had some maybe more independent success rather than this kind of scattershot, very broad spectrum of roles that he took. It kind of paints a picture to me as he was somebody who was putting in all the hard yards throughout and didn't really seem afraid to take on even smaller scale projects and options for him. And it makes me a little sad that he didn't get through in some of the bigger ones. He had that kind of time gap, as it seems, post Predator to really being an on-screen or audible presence in TV, film, and video games that are more known, really.
Well, another thing that I think happened in that kind of that in between time that you're talking about is you go through his Wikipedia and you've got to wade through a lot of his Wikipedia because there is so much there. So he is the principal, and I take that to mean principal actor, and potentially it appears to be like principal producer or owner of Red Tide Media, which is a film and production company that made tactical training films for the United States Armed Forces. So he's taking his movie cred as a military man, as Dylan, as the guy, as the colonel from Tour of Duty, and he's making training films like in his own like company here. So he's never without things to do. It just may not be stuff that hits the top of your awareness.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't seem afraid at all taking on as many different projects, even no matter the scale or name recognition they may or may not have. And I think that's really admirable for any actor in any era. And just hugely respectful of somebody who did that throughout and kept on plugging away, even if things didn't hit through to the mainstream or hit, big budget, AAA sized projects, whether it was on the small screen, big screen, or in video games.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about if anybody has, if any of us have other like favorite Carl Weathers moments. I already started with one is like the James Brown intro to, where he's Uncle Sam and just dancing around Drago and Dolph Lundgren's just looking at him like, what is this thing? I love that. I thought he echoed that amazingly in the later seasons of The Mandalorian when Greef Karga is the magistrate and he's in charge of the whole deal, and he comes rolling in with the cape that's the back of the cape, the train of the cape is carried by these little droids. It's just like, how extra do you have to be, and how much does that carry Apollo Creed is Greef Karga coming in and doing that? And of course, like it's become so meme worthy and everything is, I love the asking Baby Yoda, asking Grogu to do the magic hand thingy. It just seems so genuine that he doesn't understand what's going on, but he's just like, do the magic hand thingy.
Yeah, really captivated. Yeah.
Oh,
Shot.
what else do you guys have?
For me, it's that it's that Dylan Butch handshake in Predator. That's the if you say Carl Weathers, that's what I think of. And I guess again more into the zeitgeist thing. It's him sparring with Sly Stallone in the Rocky films. Doesn't one of the films end on that shot with the two of them, like fist to fist in a way?
3 ends and 4 begins that way, I think.
Okay, right. Yeah, and just his showmanship in the ring, whether he's on Rocky's side or against Rocky, the stars and stripes, and then does he at one point make a big deal of saying, Rocky, you're going to earn these stars and stripes, and gives them to him to wear out when he's facing Clubber Lang in Rocky 3?
Yeah, he's in his corner in 3, I believe.
Yeah. So just that, and I guess also the legacy of his character following on into the Creed films, I think is pretty big. I am more familiar with the Creed films, I guess, than the Rocky films, even if that sounds kind of crazy. But I think the tone of his portrayal of the character it made sense for the writers to create this new generation of Rocky protege and the old master to be the center point of a new trilogy of inspiring and rousing boxing drama with the Creed films. And I don't think a different actor as Apollo Creed wouldn't have had that magnetism and that kind of in-world status to follow through and have the legacy of himself carried forward into another franchise of films, not just like an odd spin-off.
Well, and that almost didn't happen. When Creed was made and Rocky Balboa, when they were doing those later films, Weathers he wanted back in.
Yeah.
He's like, I want back in myself. And he didn't want to just agree for Stallone to use the old footage in, the appropriate kind of flashbacky way. And so I think one of the films, like the first one, it might have been Rocky Balboa, is that he didn't allow his likeness to be used. So he had a heck of a contract that, Stallone didn't own that outright to begin with. So he's had smart negotiations. Is that they kind of had to do a body double and kind of shoot around his face and things when you're seeing that. But then, whether it was money, whether it was genuine, they patched it up, or whether, he as an actor saw the conscientious way that it was being used in the other film, in the double. And he says they made an agreement and he got to be the flashbacks and that powerful connection, that through point for the Creed films.
Yeah. In reading some of the biographies and obituaries, it did seem like they were at loggerheads for a bit over the found footage being recycled, but they came to an understanding. And I think that's good because, you don't want to leave that stone unturned and have fallout. And I think it kind of speaks something good of his character, that he might have had a disagreement with somebody who's even higher profile and much more known and loved than him in Sylvester Stallone, and still was up for sticking up for, this is how I want things. I want my image to be used in a particular way. And if you don't like that, then I don't want you to go ahead with it. It takes, some cojones to do that to any director or actor, let alone someone like Stallone, who's got a huge pedigree of work. And, others might have been intimidated by it, but he wouldn't back down. And again, I respect that.
Kat, any favorite moments?
I did like the way he had all the gravitas in the Mandalorian series that you mentioned, and his role in Predator. But I don't know if there's like a favorite moment per se. But yeah, he was pretty prolific, even if it's a lot of stuff that you're not really aware of.
Yeah.
I'd have to seek out, but yeah, I don't. That's a major blow to fandom and just that in general. And it's like, again, he was such a good actor. I don't know why he didn't get more major roles because he was really good. You would especially have thought that, given how well received the Rocky films he was in, that would have helped give a bigger boost because, again, he's really brought good, performances there. And man, I don't say, like, when you think of Mandalorian, also you think of that entire bunch of characters, and you're already a couple characters down, few characters down, either because you killed them off or you fired them or they've died, or the actors have died. It's like, can't keep taking that many hits, and that's a big loss that they're not gonna easily replace.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about his performances. We talked a little bit about in The Mandalorian, but we're a Star Wars channel. Is Greef Karga and like in there and his directorial. So I'm reading here, and he directed the episode Chapter 12, The Siege, and directed the episode Chapter 20, the Foundling. And I think, Gio, you said that you went back and you were really looking at those directorial episodes. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, sure. So I wanted to, whenever a big actor passes away, even if it's not somebody that I know, if the projects that they are in or associated with are accessible to me, quite often it's like a stimulus for me to go and revisit that work or to discover it for the first time. I'd wanted to do that with some of the Rocky films. As I said, it's only the beginning and end of that franchise that I have seen properly, and the rest is often just clips or moments on TV here or there. So in revisiting Greef Karga, I wanted to actually look at the 2 chapters that you've mentioned that he directed, because that goes in line with the interview I was describing from 2019, where the deal was that Jon Favreau gives him an opportunity to show off his directing chops as well as his acting in the series. And let me tell you, Chapter 12, The Siege, is some of the zenith of Star Wars television so far. It is absolutely fantastic. I had a I had a blast just revisiting it, seeing it again. We were sitting down, just really appreciating how there's so much world building in it that season 2 had a lot of. Season 2 was really where The Mandalorian started to feel like, okay, there might be a couple of side questy moments here, a little filler there, but every single frame and scene in Chapter 12 is vital to the story. There's nothing, no moment wasted. It's right off the bat where the return to Navarro is needed because Din Djarin's ship is pretty much beaten up. And let's remember, he had an awesome ride in the Razor Crest for seasons 1.5 of The Mandalorian. And after getting through one of the quests guiding Frog Lady and navigating the ice spiders, where we saw the Mandalorian really have some horror, here we had an episode that has a little bit of everything. It has a return to Navarro, seeing the change in the month since Din and Grogu have left and escaped Moff Gideon. The bounty hunters have left Navarro too, and they've resettled elsewhere. But we have Greef Karga then picking up the pieces and running the town, metaphorically and literally. And he has Cara Dune as his marshal, and utilizes, almost an unsung hero of The Mandalorian in Mithril, the blue alien with the fins, who's in the very prologue of Chapter 1 of The Mandalorian, and was there for almost comic relief. And again, here reprises his role in a comedic way, but it doesn't. The humor never overshadows or interrupts what could be a serious moment that you'd want to sit and just let the camera show you things rather than telling us as an audience, oh, this is what's happening. Another thing I admired is the stormtroopers when they get to the base. So the story is that they've come back to Navarro, his ship he's repairing. He trusts Greef Karga and Cara Dune as allies in getting his ships repaired as soon as possible. There's a sketchy camera throwback in the prologue to one of the 2 people who agrees to repair his ship. And quite tellingly, from the way the camera is, it looks kind of sketchy. And it turns out that's a spy for the Imperial Remnant. And in the wider story, this is an episode that sets up the return of Moff Gideon in being a primary threat to the galaxy and to Din and Grogu.
Yeah.
We get the siege of the actual base, which they think is a forward operating base, then turns out to be a cloning facility, and really quite a horrific, almost I was going to say Cronenberg-esque, H.P. Lovecraftian kind of vibe with the clone suspended in the fluid, whether it's Bacta or not, we don't know. When our heroes walk in and discover that this is more than meets the eye, and the way the action is shot, I think in latest chapters of The Mandalorian, there's an issue with the kind of shaky cam, or not. And definitely in other Star Wars TV, like Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, quite often when there's just two characters talking on screen, there's camera drift for some reason, and it makes really takes me out of the show. I think it takes a lot of people out, and everything is steady, everything is clean. There's a good use of practical effects, which I think makes The Mandalorian feel tangible, and when it's at its best, you get that lived-in world feel. But you also get the feeling that these are, shiny new areas for us to explore on the ground with Din and Grogu, and here with Greef Karga and Cara Dune. There's a lot of it looked like they used a reasonable amount of production in terms of set design, in terms of actual physical objects. So when they get to the base, they effectively Mithril is their indentured servant in a way, because he's responsible for the creative accounting that got Greef Karga into trouble, and is why the bounty was originally on Mithril's head in the beginning of the series. So Greef has him, and so Carl Weathers constantly uses him as like a comedy foil to have as the busybody to get just get the blast door open. Here, use this, use the spanner, or later, take the cylinder, put it here, get the doors open. Then go to the reactor core. I don't care if there's no ledge. You owe me. So really forcing the comedic character to have a role, and that's what I mean. Even the moments where you'd think these could be throwaway are all important to the story. It keeps moving at a good clip, and it has some fantastic shots leaving the base when there's the actual chase. The speeder bikes, the scout troopers, and then a TIE fighter chase through a chasm, which we've never seen that before. And I think The Mandalorian was really fantastic in season 1, giving us this scale that one TIE fighter was a really horrifying opponent to someone on the ground. That's what we saw with the finale. And here you get a squad of 6 TIE fighters pursuing them. And the CG looks great. Nothing looks overdone. Cinematography is fantastic. Sound design is great, and you've got some real fist pumping moments in this episode, whether it's Din actually getting to use his backpack, which we're critical later in the series of them not really using that, and it seems to be just a convenient way of grounding him and not allowing him to have his kind of superhero potential. But we see all the characters working together, working well individually. You mentioned Chris Bartlett, so there's a protocol droid with quite a big role in this episode that I think is easily forgotten, and that is the town of Navarro has become somewhere that there's education, healthcare, and schooling. So Baby Yoda gets to sit in his first lesson, and what does he do? Steal food from his neighbor using the Force. There's everything, all the highlights that you'd want in Star Wars and in The Mandalorian. It's just hit here, and hit really well.
Well, and talking about what you want in The Mandalorian, or actually what we didn't know we wanted in The Mandalorian, Carl Weathers also credited, was the director for Chapter 20, The Foundling, the redemption of Ahmed Best, the redemption of Jar Jar Binks. Okay, yeah. But not Jar Jar Binks, but the reintroduction of, I think previously only a character on the Star Wars game show, Master Kelleran Beck. like, talk about that one some if you revisited that.
Yeah, I did. So I think that's actually, it's an unforgettable moment, but you don't realize how it could have very easily not been a decision made in the episode. The episode, The Foundling, is very much just about the new crew of bounty hunters. We've got the Mandalorians settled now on a planet in a convent. They have the armorer to lead them. They have Pre Vizsla to kind of be, the enforcer. They bring Bo-Katan forward, and we've had the moment where she rescued Din and saw Mythosaur on, when she went in the waters of Mandalore and had that character moment. But the episode pretty much could have just been a throwaway thing where you've got, the prologue, one of the Mandalorian children, a foundling, is taken by a gigantic raptor, a pterosaur-like beast, and the episode is just, a chase scene or a bit of monster movie magic and having maybe some puppets and some of that old, physical feel of Star Wars back. But the decision to have, during a moment where the armorer is just being a blacksmith, spouting out more fonts of wisdom from Mandalore of ancient past, the camera shoots to Grogu, and rather than just being, like baby gurgling or cutesy moments like, a moment that I didn't mention that was in chapter 12, the first one he directed. The whole blue cable, red cable switcheroo thing that Din tried to teach Grogu to really use wasn't it wasn't necessary, but gave a lot of character moment for the Mandalorian and for the child to go through together.
We lost Cat for a minute there, but I think...
but yeah, it's huge. Very easily that chapter could have not had the flashback at all, and to choose to have it, and not just to make it again throwaway. I keep coming back to that, but it's having significance. It's adding character to a non-human character in the story who essentially is a puppet, but we're giving him backstory. We're giving him emotional weight, and we're trying to get fans, audiences, old and new, to empathize with a really dark time and trauma from the past. And rather than the PTSD being just something that's coming back from the action of the armorer creating more weapons, it's taking us back to one of the foundational moments of all of Star Wars, which is the Order 66 moment and the fall of the Jedi Temple. And I think a lot of Star Wars fans look at Revenge of the Sith very wistfully, because whatever you're feeling for that film, it's a really highly emotionally charged center point to the film, where you see Anakin betray everything, go to the Jedi Temple, but you don't see much really other than what's implied, beyond the Youngling Exterminator 9000 moment. But here you see what it meant, and how quickly the Jedi were dispatched. You see it from the other side, and I think that we almost like praising Carl Weathers for having that directorial decision to include that, whether it was a writer's decision or his, and to make it so important within the chapter.
I mean, really, the screenplay to that episode, and is done by Filoni and Favreau. Is both of them that did that as well, but just very powerful choices that you assume are at least somewhat Carl in how Killer and Beck is revealed in the elevator moment, and you're like, it's Jar Jar. It's it's like,
and even if you're not, then if you look it up later, you're just trying to see the credits, you might think, oh, no way, I'll find this on IMDb. I'm a film fan, let's see what's going on. These people aren't necessarily random decisions of actors, and then that's a that's a holy heck real moment there for you to discover. I think it's awesome to see an actor who might have been maligned in a horrible way in the past and subject to some really very unnecessary and horrible toxicity, just have a moment in the spotlight again, and have audiences cheer for his arrival and his impact on screen. That's huge.
I mean, amazing work, and we love that Carl was in there, and I think really just at this point in his career, really coming into his own as a director and continuing to do great work as an actor, and will be sorely missed. And that kind of brings us to our wrap up. And Gia, I don't think you've been here yet for one of our viewer mail moments. Is we introduced viewer mail a couple of shows ago. We have an email now, is right there, vcunifyingforce@gmail.com. If you have suggestions for the show, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, mail us right there, the little interwebs. So here is our question from the viewer mail, and highly appropriate to the topic of today's show, is what is the Mandalorian going to do without Greef Karga? The character himself, the show, what's going on? What do we think?
Well,
It's a tough spot.
I don't know if they even have a script for this movie, or if it's something they just said to quell other things that are going on. And given the news that we have that the Rey movie may not be happening as clearly as fast as they implied, so let's do something. Mandalorian. Well, we have Mandalorian
hours ago that there was a release that said that photography should start this summer on that
for Mandalorian.
Mandalorian and Grogu movie photography.
That's what I'm saying. I feel that because of the delays in the Rey movie, which they made it sound like that was going to be coming reasonably soon when they announced it last year, but now it doesn't look like it. It's like, well, we got to do something. So, well, we have the Mandalorian crew here and handy and ready to go. So let's do this movie. But now that, it's like Carl Weathers isn't there, and we have him, Din Djarin is camped out on Navarro, and it's like, well, yeah, Navarro can go on without, but I don't know what the story is or how they're going to, tie it in, but it would have been great to see him go on like an adventure with him. But, you can't, you're already down 2 major characters from the show now. You can't afford to lose too many more. It's like you can't, or 3, because they killed off Khalil, but that was a, creative choice.
Yeah. Right.
So it's like, I don't know. I mean, if they use the film as an opportunity to create a brand new character who's going to be there for the long term. Because they haven't really made it clear yet if, yes, this movie that they're talking about that's going to unite all the Mandoverse shows, is that meant to be the absolute ending of it and we won't see the Mandalorian anymore? Or will it just be the end of that ongoing storyline and then they'll just have Mando around for other adventures? Because if they will have him around for other adventures, then they could take this opportunity for the movie to introduce a brand new character to sign to multiple film, and get a new actor or actress to sign to multiple films to make a big impact on the show. But I mean, it's going to be a loss that's really felt, especially if he's again camped out on Navarro. And you can't just, you can be cheap and say, oh, he died, or Mando just takes off on a different mission that technically doesn't concern him. I mean, they already botched enough of season 3 anyway that I guess they could, because I don't know. It's going to be noticeable either way, no matter what they do.
Has it been absolutely confirmed that the next time we'll see Mando and Grogu would be in the feature film, not like a season 4? Or have they been?
I don't know that there's been any confirmation officially of that. I mean, you hear rumors and whispers here and there, but officially, I don't know, and I can't imagine we would see them in another season before that, because, like I said, is what was released today, if you believe that, is that The Mandalorian and Grogu, that film, is to be released in 2026. And if they're just starting filming that, if they haven't already filmed another season, when are they going to do that?
Right.
But
what's the source of this news today?
So the news today is from allegedly it came from the Disney investors call.
Okay.
That becomes sort of public, is principal photography slated to begin this summer on The Mandalorian and Grogu, and it due out in 2026.
But this is also something where they could easily have because we know they already wrote 4 seasons of the show. We know that. Giancarlo Esposito said so when he was promoting season 2. He's like, well, they've already written season 4.
Mm-hmm.
So granted, they've already compromised part of season 3 by, cutting episodes out to put in Book of Boba Fett and then making up filler episodes to take its place. But this movie could be them taking the first few episodes of season 4 and turning it, or for a 5 or 6 in the whatever arc that was going to be, and making it a movie because they know they need a win and they need to get Star Wars back in the theaters. Another thing is that, you had the strikes last year, and so they had no progress on anything for 6 months between the two strikes. And so, we need to do something, and it takes a lot longer to make this, the miniseries. And frankly, the miniseries don't make the money, at least not as much as they could otherwise get if they put out a movie.
Yeah.
Because we know that Disney Plus has been, struggling with, losing subscribers and things like that. Whereas if you put out a movie of these wildly popular characters, which have permeated the zeitgeist enough that even people who don't have Disney Plus know who they are, then yeah, you could you could have a really big gangbusters movie that'll make a ton of money, assuming it's accessible to the audience, which it can be, because season 3 seemed to put a nice bow on the story. If they didn't want to ever revisit those characters, they could have. They could have just ended it there, like when they had the iris out, which is like basically the symbol of that's it. That's the end of it.
That's all, folks.
Exactly. And so it could be a totally accessible, really easy, fun movie. And I'm not surprised that they want to start filming by summer, because presumably they would just use the same creative team they've been using for the shows.
Yeah.
I don't know did they say who the director was going to be yet?
I want to say that this Favreau is the director of that. I think they announced that the first time. Okay, yeah, so Favreau, good. Okay, so you got a solid director. Hopefully you don't have too many writers on board, so that way they could keep it, concise and not convoluted. But to me, it just seems like an easy thing, because once they found out that the Rey movie is not coming, then what we don't want, Disney has the mandate, they don't want anything to compete with Avatar movies, which have been, it was supposed to come out in even numbered years in December 24, 26, 28. But now, because of post-production delays, it's going to be December, 25, 27, 29. So now it makes sense that they're going to push this maybe into 26 because they don't want they don't want to have their own product competing against each other, particularly two sci-fi type properties. So I think it's like, well, Disney has the mandate. We need to start making money again. And we need to get Star Wars back in the theater. What's the best way to earn goodwill with everybody? Because we told them we had a movie coming with the Rey movie that sounded solid, and now it's not. Because the director of that said he got so many notes back from Disney that he basically has to start from scratch. So he's like, I'm going to go make the Peaky Blinders movie instead, which is going to be set to start filming in the fall. And so if you don't have that project ready to go, which is why Daisy Ridley said in interviews recently, don't worry, we're going to take our time with it, and I'm only going to sign on if I make sure it's right. It's like, well, you kind of already announced that you signed on when you were at London last year. You're doing
One step forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah, exactly. So they need a project. I think they already had studio space allocated, because I'm pretty sure they're going to use the volume. I would assume they're going to spend the money on rendering the effects so the volume looks great again, unlike in Kenobi or Mando season 3. It could look really good. And that's why they probably want to rush a movie, because like, hey guys, we reserved all this studio space and all this time blocked out with the crews and everything for the Rey movie. And now that we're not doing that, we need something. And it's like, yeah, we know Disney doesn't have a big tentpole movie for, was it summer of 26 or December 26, whenever this is probably going to come. And so, hey, let's make a Mando movie. Why not? And I don't doubt that in light of Carl Weathers' death, that they might have to take a step back and do some rewrites potentially. And they could do that. That might cause some delay. I don't know. Well, but I think that's might be what's going on. But I don't think there's any way you can avoid that. You're going to feel that loss. That was a great character.
You've got to feel that loss. I hope, and my hopes are that there is some way that they've done with pre-shot footage, with something that they can give him a proper send-off ending, some sort of something. And I don't know.
You mean like a Paul Walker Fast and Furious 7 right up into the sunset?
Or I don't know.
They could just leave him be and say he's still the leader of that nice town because he turned everything around, and let it be a happy ending. Like I don't like this idea that every time they can't get somebody back, well, we'll just kill off the character. It's like, we don't really need to do that. It's kind of like, again, in Furious 7, they didn't kill off the character. They just said, well, I've got a family now, so I can't go on your little crazy missions anymore. And he retires. Yeah. But it didn't work in Furious 7 when they did that, because it's not like they're never going to see each other again. They're still friends. They're just not going to go on missions together. So it's like, it was breaking the fourth wall too much in that instance. Whereas here, they could just say that he's still running Navarro, And I'm sure they have stock footage of him like in those robes or sitting behind a desk looking all regal. And they could do something, but I don't think
I
they
would be
necessarily need to
interested
go.
to see.
The other extreme would be if they go the Wakanda Forever route and make a big deal at the outset that Greef Karga has gone and make that a significant part of the story. Like, what if it's a murder mystery? Somebody murdered Greef Karga. Who did it? Mandalorian wants to get justice. That could be another way they could do it.
Yeah. Or see, I'm curious to see if, because they've been really tight under wraps on this, if we see at all or allusions to Greef Karga in Skeleton Crew, because it's rumored that those characters that are going to be in Skeleton Crew, at least some of them, are characters that we've seen in relation to the Mandalorian and the characters that are already in universe. And was Carl a part of that? Don't know.
Yeah, quite possibly.
It
would be in line with the kind of work that his character was doing in universe to have more, interactions with those pirates and whatnot. So
yeah,
it would fit.
So I mean, who knows what there is out there, and
that could also influence if they don't want to address it in the movie. They could say that, well, the movie is Mando off doing something else because he's technically retired off living off on that off in the desert outside of town. They could rewrite aspects of season 4 and make Greef Karga's absence a big deal. Like you said, Greef Karga was integral to getting the working with the pirates and how they went against him and everything. And news of given what he did to that town in Navarro, news of him dying creates like a power vacuum potentially because he clearly was a big deal there, and that could be a source of a whole new set of storylines as long as they do it respectfully or whatever, instead of just oh, he died and there's a new guy in charge. It's like,
oh, definitely. As soon as you mentioned the Wakanda Forever analogy, I'm thinking that I'd be okay with that, because I think the film tastefully managed to navigate what could have been something very uncomfortable and also not necessarily relevant story-wise, to still have a situation that pivoted around the untimely passing of Chadwick Boseman to be the kind of impetus and driving force for the sequel film. I think the film managed that quite well, and I think in a way, you mentioned power vacuum. I was going to say, the feeling of Greef Karga's loss to me feels like a bullet hole, an actual vacuum physically, and I think that if we're talking about having Star Wars to hit some emotional resonance and have easy wins, then relating the passing of Carl Weathers to the assassination of his character in universe could make for a reasonable story going forward, and then gives us a chance to, without being too meta and breaking the fourth wall, to have that mourning and feel that loss, the bereavement, as audiences, fans, general moviegoers. I think it could work well, and it's hard to give greater action, really, as you said, to Din Djarin if he's on this quest for justice, or the New Republic sees it as a huge act, whether it's pirates or the Imperial Remnant or another outside party, to really cause conflict in something that's worthy of the scale of a feature film.
Yeah. Well, only time will tell, and apparently we will maybe know something in 2026. I wish almost they wouldn't announce stuff like this, because now it's just like, oh, it's 26.
Yeah, they definitely have an issue with keeping those faucets tight and allowing too many leaks to happen.
Yeah. But anyway, is Carl Weathers, an amazing actor, an amazing man, will be very sorely missed by, definitely, by all accounts, every single person that I have seen that actually knew him, and those of us who have just been fortunate enough to see him and get to know him through his work is and that much. The good news is that much will live on, is we can still go revisit the Rocky movies and go watch Predator and see those episodes of The Mandalorian. And I think I want to go back and check out some of the ones that I haven't seen before. Is like, this makes me want to go like look for rewatch, like I said earlier, the episodes of Tour of Duty, or go watch Action Jackson. I don't know. We'll see.
I couldn't recommend watching the Chapter 12, The Siege, enough.
Yeah.
It's actually almost a standalone movie, my brother was saying as we rewatched it, and it really does feel like that. You just want solid injection of Star Wars, right into your veins. That's a perfect dose. It's such a neatly directed and edited dose of The Mandalorian, and yeah, I really highly recommend anyone, if you want to feel that kind of respect for the passing of Carl Weathers, to check that out again.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of the Unifying Force, and until we see you again I don't know, we'll have to see if the schedule gets weird with February being shorter days, but until we see you again on the Unifying Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. May the Force be with Carl Weathers, and may the Force be with you all.
Now we throw it up.
That's such a great montage.
Yeah, we should have had that up months ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot that I had it. But enjoy it, everyone.
Oh no, that's great. When I sent that Guardian article of the Carl